Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Simmons, the president and founder of Astronomers Without Borders. This is our second hangout of a week of Sundays, follow-up to Sunday that took place this last Sunday on the 12th. And we are bringing you live hangouts from solar observatories this week. And today we have from a very busy observatory where things are going on all over the place here. And I'm sorry, and one of the things is that I'm actually switching things myself, so I had a picture of somebody else working at the observatory. So I am Mike Simmons, not the person who was shown before. So I apologize for that. I have to do all the switching and everything else myself this time, so this is going to be sort of a fun thing. So we are bringing you live images from Big Bear Solar Observatory in Southern California in the mountains above Los Angeles and San Bernardino. And they are actually working right now, so there is going to be a lot of stuff going on, but that'll make it really interesting. So they're going to show you the observatory and what they do. Now, this observatory has the largest, tied for the largest solar telescope in the world for several more years until the new, larger telescope is built in Hawaii. So this is on the very leading edge of solar observatories around the world right now and doing pioneering work. And you'll be able to see that things are kind of busy there and will be interrupted here and there because of the observations that are going on right now. But that'll be part of the fun, I think. And so, John, have you got a chance to talk, or should I? This is the way it's going to go. John Varsik.
Okay, I'm John. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is John Varsik at Big Bear Solar Observatory, and John, you're in the midst of doing things right now.
Yeah, I'm in the control room here, and we're observing a little active region right now, and it was having a little flare at the moment. So I just had to check on things and make sure that we were running, and make sure that it gets logged into the log file here, and everything else.
Okay,
so,
well, John, your position at Big Bear Solar Observatory is described as what?
Well, you might say I'm kind of a support astronomer, sort of.
Okay.
I do a number of things having to do with computer support and with telescope operations and keeping track of our data flow and making sure that the images get processed correctly.
And you were doing that very busily right now, which reminds me a little bit of yesterday when we had Matt Penn from National Solar, who had pictures of himself doing some cleaning up and various other things as part of his duties as a telescope scientist. Well, let's go upstairs now. You're in the control room. We're going to go upstairs to Claude Plymate in the telescope itself. And here is Claude with the telescope looming behind him. We had a good view before earlier, Claude, of the telescope there. Is that still possible, or has something changed? And I'm not hearing you, Claude. Are you muted? Well, we're not
hearing
you,
you, Claude.
I don't know what happened there. So. Okay, well, something happened, I don't know, last minute changes or something. So we got the video, but the audio is gone. It looks like you're muted. Claude, you're unmuted now? Okay, why don't you check your USB connection or something if you were moving things around. And, well, this is the way it's going to go because Claude is also doing duty there chasing birds away from the observatory dome and various things like that. John, let's go.
Yeah,
you got a minute in between observations. So the control room here is a very active place, but you don't usually sit up at the telescope.
Okay, am I back now? By the way,
you are back.
Yes, you are back.
Let me come back to you in just a moment, Claude. Then. So,
no problem. Sorry about that.
Okay. John, so can you show us a little bit about what the actual control room is like? Maybe just pan your camera a little bit. I think you're on.
Well, what we're going to do here is I'm going to pick up the camera and have a look around. If I can see what we're doing here. So I have a number of screens I'm watching here. that are telling me about what the telescope is doing, and where we're pointed on the sun, and then also the science cameras. Like we have two cameras running right now. There's a camera looking at a titanium oxide line at about 706 nanometers, and that's this one. And then we have another system over here that is scanning the H-alpha line, and you can see how it's doing that. And so it's scanning through the line, looking at the different heights in the atmosphere.
And these are all live images from the cameras of what's happening right now. Oh,
that's what's happening right now. And I got to sit back down here, and then so Claude's up there, and Claude's going to show us the telescope.
Yeah, so let me go back up to Claude now that we can hear him as well as see him.
Okay, my microphone is working now. Is that correct?
Everything's working now, Claude. So Claude is upstairs in the telescope, and we're going to show some pictures of the outside so you can see where everybody is located. But Claude, I at least wanted to introduce you first. We don't have your lower third on, so you're Claude Plymate. What are you called? Telescope technician at
my official title here at BBSO is chief observer and the telescope engineer. Like John, we have a very small staff here, so we all have hyphenated job titles and tend to wear several hats. And where I am right now is I'm two floors above John, straight over his head, and we're up in the observatory floor. The telescope is actually right over my head right now. We can talk about that a little bit after you show some of the images of the dome itself.
Okay. And and this is, like I said, this is a little bit of a work in progress here. So I'm going to bring up some pictures here of the outside of the telescope so that we can see where we are here. And there we go. And just a moment, I'll do it yourself here. So here we're showing an image taken from the outside, which makes it look like there's this nice more than 180-degree dome sitting on the shore of a lake. It's not actually a shore. We'll show you a little bit more here in a moment. Looks like a public tour getting ready to start. And so Claude or John, you want to add anything about this, and I'll go on to show some of the others?
Yeah, actually, this picture is taken from onshore when the observatory is called Big Bear Solar Observatory. That's named for the lake. The observatory is actually out in the lake. Now, keep in mind, this telescope is a state-of-the-art 1.6 meter solar telescope, which matches the aperture of the McMath, where Matt Penn is right now, who you talked to yesterday. And we'll talk a lot as the hour goes on about a lot of the compromises that had to be made to shoehorn this 1.6 meter telescope into a facility that it was originally built for a 10-inch and a 16-inch telescope back in 1969.
Right.
And as you see in this image right now, you can if you see old images of the dome, it was a standard hemispherical dome. And now to shoehorn this new telescope in, a 1.6 meter again, into that same 26-foot diameter, they went from a hemisphere to a 5/8 sphere.
Okay. And let's one more shot of it out in the lake now, so we can see that it actually is it's not on the shore of the lake, it's in the lake. So, John, maybe you want to explain a little bit about why this thing is out in the middle of the lake?
Well, originally, the observatory was originally built by California Institute of Technology, and back in the mid-'60s, they were getting more interested in doing basically time-lapse movies of the evolution of solar active regions, of how sunspots evolve and change and so forth. And at that time they were operating from they were operating Mount Wilson, and Mount Wilson is a very good site, but like most sites on top of mountains, the amount of good seeing tends to be limited to a few hours in the morning. Now, that's not always the case, but a lot of the time that's how it is. And so it becomes difficult to get this kind of time resolution where you want to have a time-lapse movie that covers most of the day. So they decided to build a new site, and so they had a big site survey in the mid-'60s to try to come up with the best location. There had been some work done earlier, about 10 years before that, that suggested that having an observatory either close to water or surrounded by water might be a good idea because of the fact that the water has a high heat capacity, it absorbs the solar energy better than the ground does, and so you have less air turbulence right above the ground. And so some of the sites that they included in the survey were places like Big Bear and Lake Arrowhead and Lake Elsinore.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think a bird just flew through our guider.
The guider went offline.
I'll open the mirror cover. You can relock the AO. Sorry about that, Mike.
Yeah, it's just slightly off.
Okay, so this is what happens live at the observatory.
That's okay. We're fine.
The
cover open. You really got
these guys here. So yeah, now we can see Claude, who's making an adjustment here. So a bird came in, went through the auto guider, and knocked it off. The adaptive optics had to be brought back online. And John, I muted you there for a second while you're working on things there. So Claude was over there getting things realigned. John down in the control room here working away at. You got it there. Okay. So
yeah, I may have to try to chase that bird out of the dome. So you may hear a loud horn going off here in a moment.
Okay. So this, and John, you're going to have to unmute yourself when you're ready to talk.
Okay, I got
it. Got it. Okay. So here's Claude. Okay. Here's the high-tech system for disturbing the birds that land on the dome and come flying back inside. And there is the high-tech solution for that right there. John, Claude had the pneumatic wildlife extrusion device, or whatever we might call it here, an air horn. And that's, Claude, how you get rid of the birds when they're coming in during the daytime. That's just the way it is. It's got to be done, huh?
Well, it helps that I happen to be up here in the dome right now. Usually, John and I are doing the constant running up and down stairs to take care of this.
Right.
Well, maybe sometimes you can go even more high tech and have something where you can push a button and have an air horn go off.
We've talked about it. Okay, sorry to interrupt, John. You were talking about the sea environment.
Yeah, and so when they did the survey, what they found is that, and of course, all of the sites had to be in Southern California because Caltech was operating the observatory, and they wanted some place that wasn't too far away from their campus.
Yeah, so the idea really is basically that they found that water was a good thing to be near.
Right.
And while people had observed near lakes before and found it to be good, setting it up inside of in the lake itself turned out to be even a better idea.
Yes, it turned out to be better. In fact, the results that they got from the actual observing site here in the middle of the lake were, in fact, even much better than the survey results, which were taken on shore.
Ah, okay. So now, has this been done at other observatories as well since then?
Well, another site, there's a fairly famous observatory in Udaipur in India, was established basically by a fellow who had been a postdoc here and then moved back to India and set up the facility there, and it's on a location that's quite similar to this. And
now we're going
so that's a
Yeah, we're going to take a look at the workings of this because we've seen the outside of it. We can see that John and Claude are on different levels of this. Let's take a little bit of a look inside here with the diagram. And this diagram is showing where the different levels are. Now, the most obvious is in that onion-shaped dome at the top with the telescope itself in it, and we'll try and get a little bit better look at that. The control room, John, where are you on this diagram?
It's on the same floor as the blue optical tables,
okay,
but
so
it's one of the rooms that diagram just shows is empty.
Okay, so you're over here someplace?
Yeah.
Claude.
Just through the door there.
Through the door there, yeah.
Through the door.
Yeah, the room that you're actually pointing in is the room that has all our computers in it.
Okay, so those are kept down at lake level, or are you actually below the lake?
Well, no, we're still above the lake level, but we're one floor up from the entrance to the observatory, which is kind of just above the lake level.
All right.
So the telescope itself, you might say, is up on the fourth floor of the building.
Okay, so let's go back up there to Claude. And Claude, do you want to tell us about the telescope, where you are right now?
Yeah, actually, if you come back to my image to start with,
you're there.
We'll try to relate that to the image you're showing. And, well, right above my head is the primary image for the telescope. It is a 1.6 meter diameter parabola, but it's an off-axis parabola. Now, that is a thin mirror. It's only 100 millimeters thick. A lot of people, of course, assume that we would have active optics to back up that thin mirror, and this mirror cell was designed to incorporate active optics. But as it turned out, we have a passive system that the active optics were meant to back up. But
now Claude, let me interrupt you for a moment, because this is a general audience, so they probably don't know what active or passive optics mean. Can you explain that real quick?
Certainly. Sorry about that. We have the mirror is rather thin, so if it were just held firmly in a few points, it would tend to deform under its own weight. And of course, to keep it, we have it thin to keep it light, so to keep the structure as light as possible. Now, to support the mirror, we have a mirror cell that supports the back of the mirror with 36 points, called a flotation cell, that supports the mirror with the right amount of pressure on the back. But often it's found that you need more than just, I'm sorry, to make it, I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, Teresa's telling me I should click on that so she can see what I'm pointing at. Okay. So we have 36 points on the back of the mirror that are supported by actually counterweights, little levers that put the right amount of pressure on the mirror to keep it in the right shape. But often on large telescopes, you often also have actuators, little motors of some sort that are computer controlled to give the right amount of pressure onto the back of the mirror as it moves through the day to keep the correct curve on the mirror. So this was designed to have those kind of motors. Actually, there's a mount right there you can see. But once the telescope was put into service, it was found that the passive system we have is good enough to support the mirror. And if it works, don't break it.
Yeah. So Claude, in other words, this is a passive system, just like it's been done for 100 years or more.
Yes.
Just helps the mirror not to deform by applying pressure.
And it's a classic tried and true type of mirror cell.
Let's take a look at the some other parts of the telescope here.
Now, this mirror is, again, it's off-axis parabola, very strongly off-axis. So the sunlight comes in front of the telescope, reflects off the front, and forms an image up along the side of the telescope. Now, this is not your classical Cassegrain telescope. It is what's known as a Gregorian Cassegrain, which means the primary image of the mirror is formed up above, and what we have is, think about a 63-inch magnifying glass looking at the sun. That's a lot of energy that this telescope collects up. It's about 2 kilowatts of power. So what we do is we have an optic, which the camera is pointing at right now. It's actually a thin aluminum plate, which we with a small aperture in the middle of it, only about 1/10 the diameter of the sun. So that 2 kilowatts reflects off the aluminum, polished aluminum surface, and only about 1/10 the diameter of the sun passes on through to the secondary mirror, which then sends the beam down along the side of the telescope to a tertiary mirror right above my head, and then across to yet another flat mirror in the center of the telescope over here. The beam is then sent down along the rotation axis, the polar axis of the telescope, to some mirrors at the back end of the telescope, which reflect off down and to those instrument labs that John mentioned in the diagram before. Okay. So this is a modification of a standard stellar telescope, but has some unique features to work as a solar telescope. And a lot of work went into shoehorning such a large telescope into this pre-existing building. Okay, and one is that the primary mirror uses a very short focal length, an f2.4, meaning that its focal length is only 2.4 times its aperture. So that means that that image we get up at the heat stop is a very intense beam. Again, 2 kilowatts and only 36 millimeters diameter.
Okay, so Claude, I'm going to share again a diagram, but this time a different diagram, so we can see a bit what you're talking about here. So again, up at the top, we have the telescope itself, but you can see that the light comes into the telescope and goes off at an angle.
Yes,
and back along the telescope.
What a lot of people might be confused about is, again, being a Gregorian telescope, we actually have access to the primary image up near the top, so we're able to reflect away most of that energy, again using an aluminum plate which is water cooled to keep it from melting down, and then off to the Cassegrain mirror up at the top, then down along that, and that silver gold thing at the bottom you can see pointing up, that is an equatorial amount. That's the rotation axis, yeah, right along there, pointed up at the north celestial pole. So the telescope rotates around that. The beam comes out the bottom side of that at the south end, and then down to the instrument labs below us.
Right down into here, so there's an optical bench down here. So all the light that comes from this 63-inch, 1.6 meter mirror ends up in a small beam down here. In this
and we have
down below.
We have 2 optical labs, one directly below me, that is that floor right below us. That's mostly used for our infrared instruments, and then the floor below that is our coude room that has all of our visible light instruments, the ones that John is running right now, and our adaptive optics system, which is mounted on the vertical bench down there, which you can see in that diagram.
Okay, and I've just come back to your camera, and I think Teresa was helping us out scanning up along the telescope itself, so you can see a little bit of the aperture open to the outside up there, which lets the sunlight in along with the birds, and the Cassegrain mirror and up along the top of it there.
An interesting feature of this telescope, or of this mirror, is that the mirror we have was a joint project between Big Bear Solar Observatory and the University of Arizona's Mirror Lab. They wanted to demonstrate that they could polish such an off-axis paraboloid mirror as a precursor to the giant Magellan telescope, which is being built down in Chile. So what we have here is actually a 1/5 scale model of a giant Magellan telescope mirror. So we got a cut rate on it, and the telescope was somewhat designed around that.
So off-axis again, going back to, and let me share this again, off-axis, meaning that
yes,
the main mirror down here reflects the light not straight back up like an ordinary telescope, but off to the side here.
And people may wonder why we go to the trouble of making this off-axis telescope. The reason is that this is a solar telescope, and we have a very bright but rather low contrast object. So by going off-axis, there's no secondary mirror or spider network in the beam to add diffraction into our image. And also, being off-axis, there are no obstructions that would add heat or diffraction or any transmitting optics that would damage the infrared beam going down to our instruments.
So, Claude, thanks for that. Now that we've followed the beam down below, I want to go back to John, if he's not too busy, and ask him what actually happens with the light once it comes down to the instruments there.
Well,
I'm going to...
Whoops.
Claude,
Once
I had muted you while you were chasing things away. So, but I'm down here with John right now. So.
Yeah. Well, once the light. Hold on a second. So you can come over here and see what I'm doing. So I have to tell the instrument to take some more data. Okay. All right. So we did that. So once the light comes down here, there are a couple of beam splitters in the system that divert a little of the light over to the wavefront sensor for measuring the distortion in the atmosphere to run the adaptive optics system. And then the rest of the light gets sent to the science cameras. We have two science cameras running right now. As I mentioned before, we have the one camera on the titanium oxide line, which is this one, which is running at 706 nanometers. And it's a line that's kind of in the upper photosphere of the sun. Gives us a nice view of the granulation and the sunspots. You can see some of the features in the sunspot umbra. And then over here we have a hydrogen alpha system that's actually it's set up to scan rapidly through the hydrogen alpha line at different different positions in the wings of the line, and that shows us the solar atmosphere at different heights above the photosphere. And so that's this system here. Down here in the control room, we also keep track of our. We also have outside. There's a small dome with an H-alpha full disk telescope in it, and we use that for monitoring solar flare activity, and also for we use it as a roadmap for our big telescope. We copy images from that telescope and put them into our control system for the big telescope, and if we see something interesting we want to look at with the large telescope, we can just move the mouse to that position and click on it, and it'll go there.
I'd love to show people what we're talking about. Here's
okay. Let me turn this around here.
John, I'm showing a picture now.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, okay. So, so this is an H-alpha picture, and this is something that's familiar to amateur astronomers as well. who use small H-alpha telescopes to show features like this on the sun. So this is something that you do just to monitor for the active regions that you want to look at in more detail with the big telescope.
Yeah. See, for example, if you look on that picture, you can see there's a big active region in the upper right there, and so the field of view of the big telescope is smaller than that active region is, and so we need to choose the location where we're pointed for the big telescope. And so we use the full disk H-alpha image as kind of a roadmap so that we can move the mouse on our control system to pick
now
the area on the sun we're looking at.
I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to switch over to something that'll show us some of these sunspots in greater detail. Now, in Claude up there in the dome, I had muted you earlier. If you want to come in sometime, you just have to unmute yourself. But we're taking a look at the pictures there. I saw you were on wildlife alert duty there for a short time.
So here we have.
So yeah, now here's a picture of a spot. This is I think this is TiO, I think, isn't it?
This is TiO.
And that is titanium oxide, which is a relatively low temperature in the solar photosphere. That's seen a lot in red giant stars, for example, that have low temperatures. But in this case, we see it somewhat in our sun as well. So this is a lot of detail on that, both the spot and the chromosphere with the granules there. So tell us about what we're seeing there. Yeah,
so this is another active region, sort of like what we're looking at today. The region is, you can see there's a nice light bridge going across the sunspot there, and you also see the granulation quite well. You compare that to today's image. The image that you have there has been we do some post-processing on the image to further reduce the effect of the atmosphere on the image. And so you get a better uniformity across the image.
The titanium oxide line actually shows the photosphere very well.
Right.
So along with the, I chose this image to send along because it had that great light bridge, and this has always looked like a bumblebee to me. But along with that, you also, of course, see the granulation out to the side, which is...
Well, and I think, let me go to the next one, because that shows incredible granulation here. So, so the granulation being, originally it was thought they looked sort of like rice grains. We see them a lot better now than we did back then, so they don't look much like anything edible at this point. But so what's going on there with this detail and with the granules?
Well, what we're able to see with images like this one is that you can see that at the edges of the granules, you will often see these very tiny bright features right in the intergranular lanes. And these are places where you have small magnetic field concentrations. And these are features that were not easily seen before this kind of this level of resolution and technology. Of course, the other thing you see with this particular image, again, you have a nice complicated sunspot active region with a couple of nice light bridges. And you also start to see the detail in the light bridges, which is something that also was not really noticed before. That kind of detail was something that hasn't been seen before.
So this, and now for those who aren't familiar with what sunspots actually are, we're in a sense looking at different depths in the sunspot, but and sunspots represent different temperatures as well. But in this case, we're looking at just a very narrow region of all of the spectrum of all the light that's available.
Yeah. So the dark areas in the spot in this spot are places where you have strong magnetic field concentrations coming up out of the sun. The strength of the magnetic field is such that it will inhibit the normal convection of the gas in those locations, and so that reduces the amount of energy that can be brought up from below. And so you have less energy in those locations, and so there's less light output, and so the umbra of the spots will look darker.
You might also, however, point out that under the kind of resolution that we have now, inside that umbra, you now see a lot of structure, and you see bright points in there. So,
well, yes, inside of what was considered the umbra, which is Latin for shadow.
So you get the bright points in there. So it's not a uniform field inside there. There is still quite a bit of structure.
When we say magnetic field, we showed one picture yesterday when we were talking to Matt Penn at National Solar Observatory. It showed magnetic field lines coming out like threads out of the sun and going back in again. So these are equivalent to what you get with iron filings with the magnet and things like that. The magnetic fields actually come out and are represented by those lines and then go back in like two sides of a magnet.
That's a bit of a classic description, but however, you now also see that in the penumbra, the flared region surrounding the dark umbra, that with these state-of-the-art telescopes and adaptive optics, we're seeing structure inside that, not just dark lines filing out, but also bright cores and that sort of thing.
So we're seeing much finer detail. So the basic idea is, of course, these diagrams that we show are not really representing nature and all its complexity, but as we see more and more detail from things like this, we can see that it's
excuse me, I better mute myself and go chase some more birds out of here.
Okay, thank you, Claude. So, John, in the granules here also, these look very familiar. Another everyday sort of analogy would be like boiling water. You don't see it as clearly as this, but can you mention?
In general, what you have in the granules, you have in the bright area in the center of the granules where you have the gas generally flowing up from below, and so it has it has more energy in it, and then as it reaches the top of the photosphere, it will flow out to the sides of the granules and then flow back down in the dark lanes in between. That's the overall view of what happens. Of course, there are other things going on as well, so that sometimes you have these little magnetic field elements that are carried along with the flows and end up being concentrated in the downflow areas. So there's a lot of things going on at that kind of resolution that we haven't had a real good look at before.
The picture I'm sharing right now.
Okay, yes, we have the
one. Shows
the round spot.
Unbelievable granular.
Oh yeah, this one is really nice. You look anywhere in that picture, and it's just incredible. The features you can see, and we're trying to get more images like that, and also we're working on, as much as possible, getting the time-lapse movies of how these features develop and change. There are all sorts of phenomena that are happening at the edges of these granules that we're working on understanding. Things having to do with the field elements merging together and producing little jets that come up into the chromosphere, and you start seeing that in the H-alpha images. There's an H-alpha image.
Okay, this is I'm showing this one here now, and then I want to ask, well, first, what are we seeing here? This is H-alpha emission. This is a little bit higher. It's in the chromosphere then?
Right. This is the H-alpha center line, so this is up in the chromosphere, and this is above an active region. not the same one we were looking at before, but it shows a lot of the loops and details and little jet features and so forth that are coming out of the active region in this case. So a tremendous amount of complexity in these images.
Right.
And you start seeing the little bright cores in the centers of the fibrils, the dark fibrils that you see, and just all sorts of wonderful things.
Yeah. So let's. What is the size? What's the scale that we're looking at here, both relative to the first relative to the whole size of the sun, and also in miles, because the sun is about 840 million thousand miles across, which is I forget in kilometers, 1.2 million.
1.4.
1.4 million.
Yeah.
And so, how big are features like this?
Well, these features will be on the order of a couple thousand kilometers, a few thousand kilometers in size. And the field of view that we have here, was it like 100,000 kilometers?
Okay.
Less than that. Well, this one is cropped, so it's less than that.
So this is a very tiny area of the sun.
So it's a little tiny area of the sun.
But it would still, if we were to put the Earth in there, it would still be a small ball in the center of it here.
Well, it would be a fairly large ball in this.
Large ball, but we can contain the whole Earth.
So this is about 70 arc seconds across, so it's just a little over an arc minute. So this is roughly a 30th the diameter of the sun.
So there'd be like 3 or 4 Earth diameters across the field.
Okay, so let me go back to then. I'm going to go back to the one of the full disk. Now we mentioned H-alpha and TiO, titanium oxide, and also the photosphere and the chromosphere. Some of these terms are familiar to amateur astronomers. None of them are familiar to general public. But this is a picture back in H-alpha. This is full disk, so this is the whole sun. And this is taking place at the chromosphere. How are the features we're seeing here different from what we saw in the other pictures?
Well, aside from the image scale, it's a similar image to what we saw before. The H-alpha centerline, the high resolution H-alpha centerline filter that we're using is a very narrow band filter, and so what that will mean is that the sunspots themselves, which are photospheric features, are not seen as much.
John, I want to explain the difference between the photosphere and chromosphere.
Okay, well, the chromosphere is the layer of the sun that's above the photosphere, and the sun the photosphere is at about 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The chromosphere will be at 20,000 degrees and up in temperature. So oddly, the sun has this strange feature where as you get higher up in the solar atmosphere, it gets hotter. And so because of that, the features that you can see are different. As you go up in the atmosphere is less dense, and so what happens is that whereas in the photosphere you have more of the effect of the gas kind of pushing the magnetic fields around in the photosphere, in the chromosphere it's the other way around. You have the magnetic fields are basically pushing the gas around, are aligning the gas into these loop structures, which are tracing out the magnetic field lines.
So this is really a little bit more of a sort of a transition area. Things change suddenly. In the photosphere, just to be clear, everybody understands, if you look at the sun with a solar filter, you're looking at
with just a broadband filter.
Just everything. Then that is the photosphere that you see, and the chromosphere is seen just in the last few seconds before a total eclipse begins, when the moon is blocking out everything else, because the chromosphere itself is far dimmer than the photosphere, and so you can't ordinarily see it with the bright photosphere being.
Well, like for example, what I'm showing now is it's actually an image from a satellite that is basically a white light image, and so you have the sunspots over here, and you don't see all the loop structures and so forth that you see in the chromosphere. But if you look in the hydrogen alpha filter, then you see the loop structures and so forth. You know, we use the satellite pictures again. They help us figure out where we're going to look. And we right now we're coordinating our observations with a satellite project called IRIS, which they give us a set of coordinates that they're looking at, and we can compare that to the white light picture. That allows us to pick a target we can use to for contrast purposes for our adaptive optics system.
Adaptive optics system, then,
which corrects for the atmospheric distortion.
So there is certainly always going to be atmospheric distortion, even though you're out in the lake. It gets rid of all the heat effects from the sun hitting the ground around it and causing heat waves that come up.
Right. What we like to say, or what I like to say anyway, is that the adaptive optics system will make the good seeing better. It won't make the bad seeing good.
Right. Seeing, meaning in this
seeing
case,
being the level of distortion that we get in the atmosphere. Good seeing implies less distortion. And it's a term that astronomers use to describe the quality of the
sometimes
images.
Beginning amateur astronomers, the public thinks seeing refers to all the conditions, which it doesn't. It's just the turbulence that you see there.
Yeah, that doesn't tell us anything about, say, cloudiness or transparency, but it tells us about the sharpness of detail that we can see.
Well, looks like Claude is not busy.
He's
up
finished
there.
with
chasing birds away. Claude, are you keeping things clean in there?
I'm doing my best here. It's just the beginning of nesting season, so they're being pretty tenacious about trying to get in here right now. Something I would like to point out is somewhat the purpose for this telescope. Yesterday you talked with Matt Penn about out at the McMath Pierce, as you put it, that other largest solar telescope.
Yep.
And Matt talked quite a bit about the Daniel K. Inouye telescope that the National Solar Observatory is putting in out at Hawaii, which will be a 4-meter telescope, almost 3 times the size of what we have here. The Big Bear Solar Observatory, which is now funded through and operated by New Jersey Institute of Technology, but was also partially funded by the National Science Foundation and NASA. And the purpose for that is there was some interest in this design, which is very similar to the Daniel K. DKIS, let's just call it, the DKIS telescope. This is a very similar optical system, but just smaller. So this is somewhat justified as a pathfinder instrument to DKIS. So this allows us to demonstrate that this type of telescope can operate, that we can get the kind of imaging capability that we do, and also show that the frontier of infrared solar astronomy. There are some arguments that go on that there are likely a lower size for visible features on the solar surface, something like 50 or 100 kilometers. And we're very proud to say, with the current adaptive optics system we are getting, if that's true, we are at this point in the visible, resolving what could be the smallest features that there are on the solar surface. That's not the case in the infrared. For that, yes, you need a larger telescope. So at the moment, we are, of course, concentrating on doing the best job we can, getting the very best images we possibly can with the instruments we have, and continuing to develop new instrumentation. We have a couple of infrared instruments that we're trying to bring online right now. One that will look at the magnetic fields on the solar surface out in the infrared. And as you go, so we have one camera working right now. That's a slight lie. We had a problem with it this morning, but hopefully we'll get that sorted out quickly, which looks at 1.5 microns, which is about 3 times the wavelength of yellow light. And which is doing wonderful work.
Point out what's happening here too. When you're talking about wavelengths, the visible light are the things that we can see. Infrared light is essentially means it's under the red. It's redder than red, and we barely see a little bit of it before it becomes invisible to us. Mm-hmm. So this is working in wavelengths that are not visible to us, but that still get through the atmosphere. And so you can get essentially the wavelength is the color. And so you can get to redder and redder, but it's kind of an odd term because it's already redder than we can see. Oh, and there you have a visitor. So I would say that was a house finch being, see, here we're looking at this big telescope. I'm kind of more interested in identifying the birds that are
flying. The birds that are inside the dome are finches.
Yeah, finches, and I think Claude mentioned earlier the swallows are back, and they're
on the outside.
Yeah.
They like to try to build their mud nests on the outside of the dome.
And they all have their own personal annoyances.
Yeah, and the house finches, we have some nesting on the outside of our house right now. Mm-hmm. That would sort of make these dome finches, I suppose, but rather than house finches. But,
they're surprisingly colorful birds. The males are really quite a bright red. They're very attractive. I just wish they'd be attractive somewhere else.
Yeah, well, and that's the. I don't want to get started on birds, but that's the male breeding plumage. They're kind of dull the rest of the year, but this is what happens this time of year. Big Bear, let's point out that Big Bear is a small community in the mountains, a Big Bear Lake, and this is to the north of San Bernardino area, really to the northeast of Los Angeles. So it's a small community not far from a huge metropolitan area. But the wildlife up there, you have all kinds of wildlife. It's not just the birds, but you have other things as well. And this is the one thing about operating an observatory away from the people, is when you get away from the people, that's where the animals go, is away from the people. So you've got plenty of them up there.
Yeah, they live here.
And it can be quite spectacular. Along with the finches, it's not very many observatories. You can look out the window and see a bald eagle fly by. I've mentioned to people that I have worked at other observatories where there is skiing, but never where there's also water skiing. We have seen black bear here at the observatory. And quite often we have bobcats coming by. Yeah. Supposedly we have mountain lions in the area, and people have seen them. I've never seen a mountain lion here myself.
Yeah, Claude, I've lived in the mountains most of my life. I've seen a mountain lion once. They do roam around where I live right now. We did see one once up at Mount Wilson Observatory. I can leave you with the unsettling thought that they are very shy, and their senses are much better than yours. So while you don't see them, they are out there and they can see you. So
most
try
likely.
not to think about the fact that you're not at the top of the food chain there, but they rarely bother you. I'll have to deal with that. Yeah.
So anyway, we are here with this wonderful instrument, and looking forward to again getting as far along with the science and the observations we can, in preparation for the next generation telescope to come online. And a lot of people wonder what will become of a telescope like this once it's superseded with a larger 4-meter or whatever telescope in the future. That certainly does not mean that the job of this telescope is over. Again, we are a university observatory funded through the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And once the pressure is off of being the highest resolution solar telescope, then there's a lot of secondary science to also be done. And hopefully this can also fulfill a role as more of a education facility for grad students and postdocs coming through the university system.
So, okay, well, Claude, thanks for that. This is a good note to end our hour on, I think, talking about the future of the Big Bear Solar Observatory. It's had a storied past with a groundbreaking instrument before, and now with this one, the highest resolution solar telescope we have on the planet. And thanks for showing us that. I'd also like to ask Teresa Biffert-Plymate to come out and take a bow. Your crew here operating the camera. Hi, Teresa.
Hi.
Hi. So Teresa is not only being the crew up there in the dome for her husband, Claude, but Teresa is the coordinator of these Hangouts. And so she is the one that arranged the one yesterday with Matt Penn at National Solar, this one today. A little bit easier logistics, perhaps, and you just have to talk to your husband. And tomorrow we are going to have the Owens Valley radio facility that actually looks at the sun. It is a very unusual thing. Large observatory that looks at the sun itself. So thanks, Teresa, not only for your work behind the camera today, but for organizing these for us.
Oh, thank you for doing this. I think there's a lot of interest in solar and not much coverage, so I think this is great.
Well, yeah, and there's been a lot more interest in solar with the advent of inexpensive H-alpha telescopes, and hopefully people will be more interested in see what goes on in the professional observatories and what they can accomplish and aspire to, as well as learning what they are looking at. So thank you, Claude and Teresa. And going back downstairs to John Varsik. John, thanks so much for your participation. Claude up there had to take a break to chase birds away once in a while. You had to chase bugs down below there. This is an active thing. The professional observatories are not always something where you push a button and it does everything you want to. It sometimes requires active monitoring and so on. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time in the midst of your duties to talk with us and show us around.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to show you around.
Thank you guys. And so again, I'm Mike Simmons, the president of Astronomers Without Borders, and I want to thank you all for taking part in this, for for checking in and for watching this. This will be available, as they all are, on the YouTube archive before long, and almost right away. And if you'd like to recommend this to others to take a look at, that would be great as well. Tune in tomorrow. A few hours later than this, will be 2 o'clock Pacific time here, which is, I always get these wrong, 2100 hours UT, for a look at another really unique instrument, looking at radio radiation from the sun. So for now, let's take a look at the observatory again. Something more of a sunset picture. It looks like a beautiful place. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the guys in the facility right there. And so long from Big Bear Lake, Big Bear Solar Observatory, and Astronomers Without Borders. Thanks for watching.